Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and this is actually a very special show. We are starting our 20th season here doing a show, and I'm very excited to welcome my good friend, Dr. Rebecca Plute, who I specifically asked to open up our 20th season, and she has a lot to talk about today, and we're going to be talking about metabolism and metabolic health, which are kind of the same but kind of different. And it's a great way to start off our 20th year. Dr. Plute, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. It's such a privilege.
It's
so
always
excited
my
to be
pleasure to have you on my shows. And Dr. Plute is a regular on my radio show, The Dr. Ed Show, which you can see hear every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on AM 1250, The Answer. And it's blogged later on, and it's on a bunch of other platforms. So Dr. Plute is a physician in Canonsburg, and she is the head and founder of Paragon Personal Health Care. And she's a concierge physician, which I think is a fantastic concept because medicine today is so different from medicine 15, 20 years ago. And sometimes it's very difficult to even get in to see a physician, and you're on a waiting list. With Dr. Plute as a concierge physician, you have pretty much immediate access, which is a fantastic concept. Tell us what brought you from your original way of delivering medicine to the way you deliver it now.
So there were a number of factors involved in that. But in the conventional model right now, it's kind of a mass production line. You've got these limited time slots with people, which is probably pretty good for treating disease. But they say the good physicians diagnose and treat disease, but the better physicians prevent disease before it happens.
And prevention is the key to everything.
Yeah, and the conventional model is very, very disease-based. So if you come to the conventional model and you're feeling stressed out, they have to have a code to diagnose and treat you and see you, right? So they're going to say you have anxiety disorder, and that's going to go on your chart, and that can have all kind of implications, and that's almost like tunnels you right into the immediate pathway of medication and treatment. But if I talk to somebody who's feeling stressed, we can maybe prevent a full-blown anxiety disorder, and you just have this period of stress, and we can assess your coping skills, we can assess how your physical health is affecting your mental health, and there's a whole bunch of things we can do before we actually get to a diagnosis. Interestingly, in the conventional medical model, you can't bill for that. There's no code for that.
And that's what I want to talk about.
and same with the metabolic health we're going to talk about today.
It's interesting to be able to be billed in an insurance-based medical practice is you have to have a code.
Right.
So for example, this would be, there's a diagnosis of, say, pre-diabetes. In my personal opinion, there is no such thing as pre-diabetes. You're either a diabetic or you're not. And if you're having signs and symptoms of what we determine to be pre-diabetes, then you are a diabetic. That's just my personal belief. But you can't bill because there's no code and no treatment for pre-diabetes.
There is.
Now there is.
There now is a code for pre-diabetes.
Things are changing.
Yeah, things do eventually.
Pre-diabetes, there is now a code.
There's now a code for that.
So then you can bill the insurance company. What's the treatment for pre-diabetes while we're on that topic?
For the most part, the treatment for pre-diabetes is getting healthier. Diet, exercise.
Which we're going to be talking about
right?
today.
And we're going to be talking about all those things. But to that means what's really interesting is, again, in the medical model, you can see somebody for a disease such as diabetes. And you can give them a treatment for that, a prescribed treatment plan, right? But if you see somebody who just would like to get healthier, who is not unhealthy yet, but they're saying, hey, I've put on 10 or 15 pounds in the last year, I don't feel well, my energies are well, and I look at, well, nothing wrong with you, right? But there's no code for that. So like I couldn't bill them for just saying, well, hey, what we really need to do is look at why, look at your mental health, look at your physical health, look at your diet, look at your activity levels, look at your gut health, look at these really important things, and let's try not to ever get a billable diagnosis.
Exactly.
Let's just try to get you staying on the path of health and wellness and do a maintenance thing that keeps you from the point where you really fit in the medical model and you have a disease.
Prevention
right?
is basically the cure.
Yeah. And if you do have a disease, let's try to reverse it. where we can. Let's reverse the things that are going wrong so that you don't have a disease.
And as a concierge physician, you're able to make your time because you're not answering to a corporation.
Yeah.
You're not answering to a hospital, which is generally owns these a lot of individual practices. They've been bought out by the hospitals. Hospitals are basically owned by insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. So there's this directive that falls all the way down the path.
Yeah, there's all these layers of bureaucracy and, Yeah, when I was employed for a conventional practice, right, my number one boss is my patient, right? And then I have to answer to my practice standard and, and answer to the information, my own personal knowledge of it. But then I have to answer to my medical director, the administrator, and then I also have the bosses of the third-party payers. Medicare wants to tell me how to do things.
Yeah.
Highmark, Aetna, UPMC. I have all these bosses, whereas in the concierge practice, it's me answering to my own level of professional knowledge and sharing that with you, the patient, who is making the determination what you need to get out of your relationship with your healthcare professional.
Exactly, because sometimes you go to these places, these clinics, or even your private practice physicians or who are associated with hospitals or corporations. There's 8 different physicians in the practice, and you don't always get to see the same physician. And you need a relationship, one-on-one relationship, for that person, that physician, to understand who you are and how you live your life and what your health conditions are. Not just somebody looking at a chart and sitting down 5 minutes with you and then coming up with some kind of diagnosis and treatment plan. Yeah. I had a conversation about a physician with one of my physicians, and just for clarity here, Dr. Plute is a patient of mine, and I'm a patient of Dr. Plute's. But I see other people as well, and I saw a specialist who was lecturing me on something, and I just let him lecture. And I went back to one of my friends who's a physician that I see, and I was telling him about it, and he says he doesn't know his patient, he doesn't know his audience, because everything that physician had told me, the specialist, didn't apply to me, because it's not how I live my life.
Yeah.
But he just makes this generalist because he doesn't know you.
Right.
So as a concierge physician, you're able to really know and understand your patient, which is critical.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and metabolic health is probably one of the most illustrative conditions of that, right?
And we're talking about metabolic health today, and we need to define that, because I think people understand, Dr. Plute, the term metabolism. And you'll hear this often, I hear it all the time. Somebody that's overweight, they say, I have a slow metabolism. Well, what does that mean, slow metabolism?
Well, I think for most people's experiences, like in a lot of people's head, their understanding is, well, my metabolism isn't working. Maybe it doesn't work the way it was when I was younger, right? I eat this much amount of food and I keep putting on weight, and even when I diet, I just feel more tired and I still put on weight anyways,
I'm not losing
right?
weight
So there's
I'm watching
something
my diet.
wrong with my underlying metabolism, the way that it's written. Whereas when we talk about metabolic health, we can move away from that a little bit and saying, what's impacting? If your metabolism feels slow to you, are there factors that we can tweak to get that moving along, to get you moving towards better metabolic health, where you stop using energy that you eat just to store more, but the foods that are eating are now energizing you and you're getting rid of the excess weight, right? So in an optimal state of metabolic health, what is happening is we have an intake of food, which is our building blocks for energy, and we have an expenditure of that energy that is maintaining our immune system, maintaining the health of our joints, maintaining our body in motion, maintaining our mental acuity. So in optimal,
even how we sleep.
Yeah, and optimal metabolic health, your system is functioning in such a way that all of the food that you eat is serving a purpose to generate your sense of well-being and your actual health within your body. In a state of poor metabolic health, right, the body is undergoing constant decay. Besides natural aging decay, it's going on these other decay. The bacteria in the gut are all wrong, the inflammation in the joint is all wrong, the fog in the brain is all wrong, and the fat and lipid storage is disordered, and it's not only building up in an unhealthy way around our waist, but it's building up in our arteries. So what we want to do is go from poor metabolic health to optimal metabolic health.
So metabolic health is basically your cells functioning correctly in homeostasis.
Yes.
Homeostasis. I always do that. I trick myself. Hemio is blood. Homeostasis is cellular function, and you want that balance of everything running correctly. Because the idea is production of energy.
Yeah.
And in the production of energy, you have to function well to get rid of the waste that's produced in that cellular function. So if you look at every cell as an individual life form, basically, they all have a positive and negative pole. They're all creating energy, and they're all functioning together. So one cell makes 100 cells, makes 1,000 cells, makes an organ, makes our bodies, makes our bone, makes everything.
Yeah, we have all these sub-communities.
Yeah, and if they're disrupted, it impacts another one.
Right.
You know, so how do we then support our metabolic function, our metabolic health?
Well, I think, you know, part of this is like mentally we know what we're supposed to do. Although there's a lot of foods out there that are packaged as healthy foods, or we think might be healthy, or they taste really good and they're really appealing and we've gotten anything. And the foods that we eat have caused a lot of disruption. The sedentary lifestyle that we lead causes some disruption. But there are underlying things, and one of the exciting things we're going to talk about is a very special hormone called GLP, which is an incretin hormone, and it helps regulate our food cravings. It helps regulate how our gut functions, what's in our gut, and then how we use it for energy.
We make that.
We make our own GLP.
And as we age, do we make less of it?
No, but as we live on an American diet with sedentary thing, our body becomes in a state where it's not getting the message through. That the GLP is still there, it's still being manufactured, but the doors to health that it opens are a little shut, right? It's supposed to tell us that we're full. It's supposed to tell us we're not hungry right now. But we get numb to it. We have this high sugar spike diet. We have this every day. After a couple decades of that, you know, GLP comes knocking on the hypothalamus and it says, hey, you don't need anything to eat right now. And the hypothalamus says, shut up, that looks good, right? And you know, the same thing is, you know, when we're sitting there eating a rich meal, the GLP is released by our intestine and it says to the stomach, hey, don't stretch anymore. He's had enough now. And the stomach's like, I don't care, GLP, I've been listening to you. I'm not listening to you. I want to eat this, right? So the stomach stretches more and more. And then the next time.
Like a balloon.
Yeah. So our stomachs get bigger to accommodate larger and larger meals. But at the same time, as we're aging, we don't need as much energy. And if we're not expending ourselves like in the sport that we were when we were in our 20s, we don't need that same amount, but our stomach's big enough to fool it and our brain is looking at it like it looks good, and it becomes really difficult, really challenging to overcome those drives. And that's been some of the excitement in these, the semaglutides and the tirzepatides, the Wegovy, the Mounjaro, the Zepbound, the Ozempic. All of that stuff is really just GLP at a higher level of intensity to reawaken those systems to function the way they should, which is why weight loss is so much easier on those and so much more natural. You know, for a lot of patients, being on these medications is really like having that younger, more youthful metabolism where they do get busy and engaged in life and they're not constantly having the food noise in their head.
Yeah,
or they do feel a meal and they're like, oh, okay, I've had enough, and they go on to the next thing in their life instead of still sitting at the table.
So you eat to society. I'm going to say society. It's not coming out. Spit that word out for me. Fullness.
Satiety.
Satiety. I'm
Yeah,
thinking
you were
society.
looking for the word satiety.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for exactly. that's where you should stop eating. You feel satisfied.
Right.
If you eat a high carbohydrate diet, you'll feel that for a short term, and then the body makes you feel hungry again because you haven't really satisfied that.
Yeah, so take pasta, which is refined flour, or take bread. Unfortunately, by the time we're experiencing any satiety, we've already overeaten by 20%. So a lot of us, kind of are conditioned to think, well, I stop eating when I have satiety when I feel full, right?
Become a hard
And
word
I
to say.
start eating, yeah, I know it's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
I start eating when I feel hungry. But as most people, 70% of the population that is trying to get healthier with their weight, is they know if you eat when you're hungry and you stop eating when you're full, you're going to keep gaining weight.
Yeah.
Right? That there's got to be some other triggers. As we age, we have to start to learn what is the right amount, what is the right kind, what foods are going to make me feel the best, which foods are going to help me maintain my health and not develop the diabetes and the coronary artery disease and the weight-related cancers.
So our body produces hormones, insulin, something called ghrelin. What is ghrelin?
That one I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you.
Ghrelin actually makes us hungry.
Okay.
And it's what tells you to go ahead and eat. And if you're not eating the proper foods, your body's going to keep telling you
to eat more,
that you're
right?
hungry.
Even if you don't drink enough water.
And that's a big one. Sometimes you're not even hungry, you're just thirsty.
Yeah.
And
your body knows it needs something. It's telling your
something.
brain something.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think the something is French fries, but that's not what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does insulin play a factor in, let's say, weight gain?
So insulin, I think most people know insulin lowers the blood sugar, right? We eat, our blood sugar starts to rise. Insulin lowers the blood sugar. But the real part of the story is insulin lowers the blood sugar by storing it into fat cells, right? And there are certain foods, and insulin, by the way, gets released from the pancreas, from the beta cells in the pancreas, when food goes from the stomach into the small intestine. The small intestine makes a guesstimate based on what's coming into it about how much insulin to tell the pancreas to release, right? And if it's a refined carb, a piece of pie and stuff like that, it's going to tell the pancreas to release a lot of insulin. But the problem is the pie didn't come with fiber. So the gut anticipated that most natural foods have this all fiber. So, we're going to be getting this high load for hours. So it tells the pancreas to release too much. The sugar was high from that pie, but all of a sudden it starts to go down really fast. The body panics. It tries to set up resistance, say, no, don't drop the bit. And then we start down the path of insulin resistance, right? Because the body's trying to protect itself from the sugar dropping too low. So now the next meal that you eat, you're going to release more insulin still, and you're going to get more resistance, and that's the path of type 2 diabetes.
And people don't understand that term, insulin resistance. I think it's starting to become a little, making people more aware of it. But insulin resistance lead to diabetes, lead to weight gain, lead to high blood pressure.
Yes.
And the medical profession tends to treat a symptom. So you walk in, your blood pressure is high, here's a blood pressure pill to lower your blood pressure, and sometimes that's absolutely necessary. But really not looking at why do you have high blood pressure? Are your kidneys not working properly, or are you insulin resistant? And I think that insulin resistance is probably one of the biggest factors, because everybody talks about how salt impacts, and it has a minor impact in my opinion. Sugar is a bigger impactor on high blood pressure. I don't know if you feel that way, but that's how I see it.
I think, yeah. And then when you put the two together, you're not just adding, you're multiplying the effects, right? So sugar and salt together.
And then,
so pressure up.
So the pressure becomes a problem, which then impacts other organs in your body, from your kidneys to your heart. I mean, what everybody doesn't understand, that all this ties together and interacts together. They all work synergistically.
Right.
And you have to look at the big picture and look at what I call insults.
Yeah.
And we tend to insult ourselves all day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you turn on the TV, there's all these commercials to sell you things that you shouldn't be eating.
Right.
The food is processed food mostly is what we're eating today.
Right.
They say the standard American diet, that is sad. And even how a lot of the fruits and vegetables and meats aren't grown, or the animals aren't fed properly the way they eat naturally. They're fed chemicals to make them fatter. They're fed things that they shouldn't eat. Chickens should be eating grass and bugs and making beautiful eggs out of the grass and bugs, but we feed them all kind of grains and soy and all that kind of stuff. Well, you're in effect eating that soy when you eat an egg that's grown by a chicken that has been eaten, right? So we insult ourselves. Then we add smoking to that. Even medications have an impact on our metabolic health.
Yeah, and there's so it all adds up. That's what it becomes, right? So when people say, well, I don't know if I can get chemical-free beef, I'm like, well, that's okay. If you'd like to eat beef, and if you can get farm-raised, fresh, and grass-fed, that's great. But if you can't, then have the 5-ounce piece of meat instead of the 12. Have the variety in there. Switch your beef with your chicken, with your plant protein, your beans and stuff like that. Don't always keep it the same thing, and keep it smaller. Because if it happens to be an unhealthy thing for you, well, it's less damage if you took a smaller amount of it versus if you took the whole big whopping, what they'll serve you at, Texas Roadhouse.
Yeah. Well, I can remember going out to dinner when I was growing up was a treat, and now it's like a daily event.
Right.
No one cooks at home anymore. We have different organs in our body, and they're all designed to do a certain thing.
Yes.
And so what is our liver designed to do?
Our liver, one of its primary functions is detox, right? So, our liver is this clever thing that, 50,000 years ago, if you accidentally ate some rotten fruit, the liver would be like, no problem, I can detox that for you. Then we're like, oh, well, let's bottle it. Let's bottle rotten fruit and drink that every day. And the liver's like, okay, I guess I've got more detoxing to do. And the liver can be damaged. The liver also tries to detox what's going on with our sugar metabolism and stuff like that. Now, the liver also makes protein products for our blood, and it helps us, make anticoagulations. But, from the metabolic standpoint, the number one thing the liver does is take the food, package, process, detox, and have ready healthy stores of energies and micronutrients to be released in the blood when we are, because the liver does a little storage of this too. So it takes whatever we eat, good, bad, or in between, and it gets it ready for use in our body in a way that's as healthy as possible. So it's like the soldiers standing out there like, oh my gosh, he just ate this, this, and this. Well, we'll try to destroy this and keep this and sort it all out. And oh my gosh, I'm an exhausted liver.
Yeah, it even makes bile to help us digest the fats that we consume.
Right.
And then most of us have a gallbladder that stores it for the excess fats that we eat. But we're overwhelming our liver. And it used to be in the days, if you had somebody with liver disease, it was because they drank excess alcohol. Now, that's quite common for people to have fatty liver.
Now, one of the number one reasons for liver transplant is cirrhosis due to fatty liver disease.
And so what happens, you're overwhelming your liver, and mostly probably with carbohydrates, and the liver can't handle it, and it then becomes fatty, and then becomes scarred, and then you're in trouble because you can't live without that liver.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember, if you say, well, if I have a choice of having a potato, right, which is like pure starch, or the pasta, right, that has the preservatives in it, the potato, even if it's exactly the same amount of grams of carbohydrate, is your safer bet. Why is that? because if it's a processed food and it's got preservative chemicals in it, the liver is taking care of the carbohydrate at the same time that it's also trying to break down those toxic preservatives, and that double taxes, triple taxes the liver.
Exactly. And the thing about it is people don't realize that, you know, we heard the term carbohydrates, and we heard natural sugars and refined sugars, and they're all carbohydrates, whether you look at a sweet potato, a potato, even fruit, very high in sugar. Fruit juice, very high in concentrated sugar. You mentioned something earlier that people need to be aware of. Nature is wonderful.
Yeah.
And they make a fruit that's sweet, but it has fiber in there that slows that absorption of that down, and you mentioned that. But there's also vitamins and minerals in there.
Right.
So the sweet attracts you, and you're getting those vitamins and minerals. When you eat processed food, sometimes the carton it comes in is probably more nutritious than the food that they processed inside there. So you really have to make wise
and getting
decisions.
back to the other fascinating thing about how the body and, you know, what is naturally available to us works is when we eat a natural fruit, and it goes in the stomach and it starts hitting the intestine. The very fructose, the sugar, like in that ratio of how sugars are in fruits, because there's a couple different kind of sugars, tells the intestine to tell the pancreas is we need just a quick shot of insulin, right? And so if you drink a fruit juice, I always tell people, you know, standardly we'll pour ourselves 8 ounces. Do yourself a favor, either have the fruit that's coming with the fiber and all the things it should be and no preservatives, or limit that juice to 4 ounces and have a glass of water with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a big help. You know, in the good old days, you ate according to the season, because you only had certain foods that were around, and you were kind of set up to gain a little bit of weight before winter, so that you can get through the winter when food wasn't available.
Yeah.
And then you lose it over the summer, and it was, you know, like a bear kind of does, right? Now, with the availability to have whatever we want every day of the year, it has created some problems.
Right.
And in addition to the body unable to handle all that, because that's not the way we really should be eating, we have all those preservatives and chemicals in there. And that totally destroys our metabolic health. You know, Dr. Plute, we're our break. We'll be back, and we're going to talk about the second half of metabolic health and what you can do to support yours. We'll be back with Dr. Rebecca Plute. Welcome back to Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with Dr. Rebecca Plute talking about your metabolic health. And you know, your metabolic health is your overall health. It's your immune system, it's your digestion, it's how your cells function. It's really everything that makes you alive. So what are some of the components, Dr. Plute, about our metabolic health? I know we have a number of organs. We were talking before the break about the liver, which is key. We have another, people don't really know this to be an organ, but it's our thyroid. And that plays an extreme important factor in our metabolic health. What does our thyroid do?
So our thyroid has one of the main hormones that it makes is, we call it thyroid hormone, right? There's a pituitary gland, it tells the thyroid, it reads what our levels are and tells how much. This thyroid hormone is a powerful metabolic regulator. So back when you and I had this conversation about slow metabolism, right? If you're low on thyroid hormone, guess what you're gonna have? You're gonna have a slow metabolism. Now that thyroid hormone has got its fingers in a few other things besides metabolic rate. But metabolic rate is one of the primary things. So there are diseases where you get too much thyroid hormone, right? And you get hyperthyroid.
That's kind of rare,
like Graves' disease. Yeah. But what will happen is the person's body temperature will raise. That's high metabolism, right? They'll sweat more. They'll get a little sugar trig. a little shakiness, and their metabolism is running at a high speed. Like they will be eating 4,000 calories a day and still losing weight. And everybody says, well, I would love to have high thyroid,
everybody
right?
would say that.
But unfortunately, it's taxing on your heart, and it'll make your bones turn like extremely brittle, and so it's not good to have too much thyroid. On the other end of the extreme, which is a common thing, and it may have something to do with how much our diet taxes our thyroid and some of our toxins and immune exposures. The most common autoimmune disease out there is when the immune system turns against the thyroid, destroys it slowly, or in some cases very quickly, and you don't produce enough thyroid. And then that is pro-weight gain, feeling cold, actually having your body basal temperature drop, being sluggish, storing fat, not having the energy directed towards your muscles, whether it's going to do work for you and move you about the planet in your day.
That thyroid hormone is so critical for our metabolic health, and I think it's probably one of the most undiagnosed or misdiagnosed disease processes we have. And you look at disease, the term, it really means dis-ease, or that homeostasis being out of balance.
Right.
So, in a given year, you make only a teaspoon of that thyroid hormone, and we know of 4 types of that hormone: T1, 2, 3, 4, and we also know that T4 is an inactive form of that hormone. We're not even sure what 1 and 2. There's controversies whether we know or what they do, how exactly.
If you have a T3 or T4, they can be converted into them. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, but we know that we use the active bioavailable form of T3. But what's interesting is that hormone is nothing more than an amino acid called tyrosine and iodine. But we live in the Rust Belt. I hate that word, but we do. That's what our area is called, and it's all around the Great Lakes: Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Rust Belt states. We're very low in iodine, and people are afraid of iodine for some reason. But that's what our thyroid hormone is.
Well, it needs that for a building block, right?
Yeah.
So much so that, I don't agree with everything the government does all the time, and I think the government, there's times when it's doing really good things and times when it's doing not so great things, sometimes out of ignorance, maybe even sometimes out of malice. But, one of the good things our government did is to realize that there was such an iodine deficiency that we could put it in the salt. And when people used healthy amounts of salt, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it prevented a lot of goiter.
The only thing is, that iodine isn't the best form of iodine that's in that salt.
Yeah,
it's not the most available.
Yeah.
And the government did something not so good, is they took iodine used to be in all the baking powder,
right.
The flour, and they took it out and put in bromine. Now, we don't have a requirement for bromide at all.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Yeah, but it's in
our food.
It's in our food
Need
supply.
it or not, does it cause any problems?
Yeah, well,
we don't think it does.
I'm going to tell you, it's interesting that iodine, fluoride, bromide, and chloride are halides. They're all in the same family. Iodine has a large
periodic table.
Yeah, that's one of the first things we learn. We know that the iodine molecule is large, and those other 3 are very small, and they're able to displace that iodine and get in there. And we're being bombarded by chlorine, fluoride, and even bromine to an extent. And if you're getting in a hot tub all the time, you're getting hit very hard by all 3 of those.
Yeah.
So you could have all of these signs and symptoms, which is 5 new shows, but you can have all these signs and symptoms that your thyroid is not working properly, and they test you and they say, oh, your T4 is fine because you're producing it, but it's a fake T4 because it's not iodine on that number 4, it's those other 3 halides. So that's something that you really have to investigate if you're showing signs of slow metabolic rate. So that thyroid is critical, and I think the medical profession has kind of ignored it because the gold standard dictated by the pharmaceutical companies was check your T4, check your maybe your T3 reuptake
And TSH.
and TSH, and those don't give you the true basis of how you're.
What they will give you, right, is when you already have. We get back to that beginning of our conversation. They will tell you when you already have disease that needs treated with available medications. What they won't tell you is when you're starting down the path of disease and there's things that you can personally do to take charge of your health and avert having your thyroid be permanently dysfunctioning, right? And that's what I am most interested in as a healthcare provider, is how when we're starting down the path of disease, we can pull back and stay on a path of health.
Yeah.
You know, and thyroid's another great example of that.
So you look at, there's the component of the liver, we have the thyroid, and then we have our gut. How critical is our gut in our metabolic health?
Well, our gut is the center of where everything happens.
Uh-oh.
Right?
What does that mean?
Wait, right. So we've got gut and brain, and the relationship between gut and brain is fascinating, right? Because the brain is making decisions about what we're put up in the gut, right? So the better the brain health is, the more that the brain is able to be wise and discerning about what we're actually putting in and how much we're putting in, the healthier the gut's going to be. But if we put the wrong things in, like we put the highly processed, highly refined carbs we find instead of the sugar, right? And it sits in the stomach and it goes into the gut and there's too much of it, and the kinds of bacteria that like refined sugars are not great kinds of bacteria. And then those bacteria like make too much gas, they over distend the stomach, they're the wrong kinds of bacteria, they're making their own little toxic byproducts, some of which the liver additionally has to like detox too. And you feel lousy, and it tells the brain you're tired. You lose your sense of vitality. Part of your brain is like, oh my gosh, something's wrong, something's poison, something's wrong, right? So your anxiety levels go up, right? Another part of your brain is like, I just don't feel like going to work today, or I've always enjoyed painting, but I just don't have the energy to get the paints out. What's going on there? It could be what you ate.
And that's so absolutely true. And you look at the gut is where everything gets processed. So you have the small intestine and large intestine. And on a simplistic basis, the small intestine is where all the absorption is going to occur, and the large intestine where elimination. That's a very simplistic approach to that. You can develop things that we term called dysbiosis or leaky gut. And these proteins that should be processed and eliminated they slip through little holes in your gut, and they go to places that they shouldn't go, like your joints, and then you have arthritic problems. We destroy our gut by the things we put in and the things we don't put in. And so, you know, every day in my practice, I write antibiotic prescriptions, and every time I write one, I cringe. And I shouldn't, but I know that there's going to be a positive benefit because, you know, antibiotics save lives.
Yeah, they do.
Right? And you could have an infection in various areas of your body, go right to the heart, kill you, go to the kidney, cause kidney damage, go to your brain, end all, you know.
Right, and then there's the new one is you can have bacteria in the plaque on your teeth that are going to your colon cancer, turning on colon cancers, which is believed to be one of the reasons why colon cancer
Exactly,
has risen
and
in young
Alzheimer's.
people.
There's, you know, so there's all these issues, and that's why maintenance and prevention is key, as you explained. But you prescribe an antibiotic. Well, an antibiotic, there's only a certain amount of room in your intestinal tract. And you have different things in there. You have fiber, food, proteins, you have bacteria. You have what we call good bacteria, and you have pathogenic bacteria. You have fungi, you have viri in there. They're all competing for a certain amount of space. When you take an antibiotic, it's going to wipe out the bacteria, and it's going to wipe out the good bacteria first, and then get to that pathogenic bacteria. And then it's going to allow things like fungi and virus to proliferate.
Or undesirable bacteria, bad actors to overgrow.
And then now you're having this problem. And we're drinking chlorine, we're drinking fluoride.
Yeah, it's amazing it works as well as it does, as often as it does.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. But we keep insulting it on a daily basis.
Right, but it keeps going for us
And
until it doesn't.
You mentioned you have this communication between your gut and your brain, and you have a communication between your gut and your heart. This is well established medical research. It's not, I'm making this up. You actually have a communication between, they talk to each other between your gut and your thyroid.
Yeah, they got like all these little, like the incretin GLP we were talking about earlier, all these little messengers that can be released in your blood sugar and send messages to other parts of the body, right? The systems are designed so that we can coordinate flawlessly, effortlessly, whether we're coordinating immune system attack or we're coordinating how do we manage, you know, the nutrients and everything we just brought in with this last meal, or how do we manage like maintaining our marathon run today, or how do we manage our eyesight. Like all these little things are talking to each other. It's like this fascinating, amazingly designed civilization.
Exactly, there are communities going on in there.
I know, it's so exciting when it's working great.
And then we disrupt that, and then we see the effects of it, which we call signs and symptoms of disease.
Yeah.
Or disease. So, I mean, it can lead to something that becomes non-reversible. When I give an antibiotic, I always give a spill to my patients. You need to put probiotics back in. And it surprises me how many people have never even heard the term probiotics, because they seem to be everywhere. But I give that talk 2 hours after the antibiotic, take some probiotics. So take a little more than what the bottle says, because you're trying to replenish this, because as antibiotics are knocking them out. And you need that healthy gut. If that's disrupted, then you're going to have issues.
Right.
So all of that goes into how our cells function, how our immune system functions, how our digestion functions. Like, you know, I'll see a lot of patients that are taking some form of acid suppressant because they had GERD.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You're not breaking down proteins, and you're not breaking down vitamins and minerals in order for your small intestine to absorb them if you're on those products, because you need stomach acid in order to do that. And what people don't also realize is that stomach acid is one of your protectors from pathogenic germs. It kills it. And if you're low stomach acid, you're now able to get those in your system and absorb them. So what I'm trying to paint is a little picture here, and I think we're doing a great job of this, is how each one of those things don't work individually. And when you disrupt one, you're disrupting the other one. So there are certain medications out there for people that have diabetes, because diabetes is one of the biggest metabolic processes out there that I see, because it has a great impact on eyesight, on heart, on kidneys, and when it goes unchecked or unmanaged, you see people lose their kidneys, you see them lose their eyesight, you see them have heart problems. So you don't want to treat all those individually, although you may have to support them. You want to look at what's the cause of diabetes.
Yeah,
so
that root cause stuff.
The root cause stuff. So what is the root cause of diabetes?
The opposite of metabolic health.
The opposite of metabolic health.
Right, right. It's a disrupted, disorganized, disordered, panicking metabolism.
So there's medications out there, and you mentioned some of them at the opening of the show, that were designed to help people with diabetes.
Yeah.
But they're seeing another factor in here
Right.
for their usage.
So 14 years ago, there were 2 medications out, Byetta and Victoza, and I was very cautious about the prescribing of diabetes medications, because before that there was a group of medications that were not good for people, were not good for their heart failure and stuff, right? So we came out with these GLP one, like they mimic the GLP hormone we have, but they last a little longer and they attach a little more powerfully to the receptors, right? And you know, in what began to happen in my treatment of diabetes is, you know, up until I started with those medications 14 years ago, diabetes was a failure model, right? When somebody got high sugar and you diagnosed them with diabetes, you would give them this pill. And when that failed, you would give them this pill. And when that failed, you're always failing, right? You would give them this pill. And when that failed, you would start them on insulin. And when that was failing, you would start them on more insulin, right? Yeah. And that's what it was. And the whole time you were having the heart attack, you were having the stroke, you were having the heart failure, you were having the kidney function, you were starting to amputate stuff, you were starting to go blind, right? And this is just how diabetes went when I started in medical school 25 years ago, right? So, but with the advent of these medicines, what started to happen? Well, there was this given that by the time you get that first high blood sugar, half the beta cells that were desperately trying to overproduce insulin to deal with insulin resistance in your pancreas were dead. And they were just going to keep dying at the same rate no matter how well you controlled the blood sugar. These medicines, like whether we're talking about the Mounjaro, tirzepatide, semaglutide, Ozempic, Victoza, they preserve the beta cells. The beta cells stop dying at that diabetic rate, right? So you actually can start taking away medications. Now, here's where the real power is, because these medications are so powerful, right? They will lower that blood sugar. They will, even if somebody puts no mind into their diet or exercise, they're going to get some substantial benefit. But what really gets exciting, whether we're using these for weight loss or we're using them for diabetes, is when somebody makes that conscious decision to say, I would love to take care of my metabolic health. I would love to have a healthier body weight. I would love to have cleaner arteries. I would love to reduce my cancer risk. And they use this medication as a tool, and they're really engaging and learning the journey about what foods are not just good for anybody's body, but their own personal individual body. What type of exercise works best for them, right? When you put this medication with the right mindset, the extreme improvement in metabolic health is the most exciting thing I've ever done in my practice.
So one of the positive side effects of these medications is weight loss. Mm-hmm. So how does that happen?
Several ways. One is there's in our hypothalamus like this food noise, people call it, like the urge. You see something like, oh, I want to have that. You think of a food, I want to have that. This tells you you're full. And so if you do have food pass in front of your head, you're like, do I want that or not? And if you're consciously engaged in a healthy diet, you can make an evaluation. You can say, well, now that I think about it, those are some fresh raspberries. I haven't had my vitamin C today, and I haven't had enough calories. Yes, I'm going to have that. Versus, well, that's ice cream. I had a big dessert and dinner last night. There's probably not room for that. So it can put you just instead of that drive, like I want, to actually making a critical decision about whether or not you need it and whether or not it's beneficial to you. And, you know, if it is a pleasure food, if I've eaten healthy all week, maybe I have room for a small portion of a pleasure food that really is kind of more of a junky thing, because it's less of an insult that I've ever done in my life, right? Yeah. So it does that. It also slows digestion, right? So that things sit in your stomach a little bit longer.
Which gives you that
a feeling that you're full longer. So it adds on that not thing. And it also, you know, directs your sugar. It gives your body, especially if you're exercising, it really helps direct any of that energy, the sugars and the starches that you pull from that meal and the proteins, and direct them towards your muscle instead of towards fat storage.
So are these injections you take or pills that you take? How's it?
It's available in pills, but the most powerful forms have been injections, and the once weekly injections are the easiest. They are extremely successful medications. They, you know, with no insurance company, the cost can be very prohibitive at $1,200 a month. You know, there are like, we've talked about Jeffrey's pharmacies. They're, you know, they've been compounding medications with, you know, really strategic, and they send samples to the FDA. They're able to do these medications for about $300 to $350 a month.
And are they? Those are like liquid forms? Or
those are the injectables.
Injectables.
Yeah, and in my office we have a weight loss clinic. that really, again, focuses on bringing long sustained healthy, because most people, if they can afford to do the $350 or whatever for a 1-year period, may not be able to. There's some experts out there who says you'll always have to be on that. But what I've found in my experience with these medications is if you can really help somebody take advantage of the fact that, you know, like weight loss without these medications is completely possible and completely wonderful. But a lot of people struggle with having to invest so much and not getting the results. Here, if you're using this tool properly, you're getting those results, you're getting that positive feedback. You can put these healthier ways of choosing your food and choosing your activity in place and sustain without the medication eventually.
Changing your habits then.
Yeah.
Changing your addictions.
Changing your mind,
Yeah.
right? Changing your habit, overcoming your addictions and your mindless eating to become mindfully aware and enjoy the healthy, because that's one of the important things. And here's why getting success is so important. There's this happy chemical in our brain, the dopaminergic. When we do something that is satisfying that we're successful at, we get this good feeling, this rush. Like if you're working on fixing your car, right? And you rev it up and you've done it and you're like, yes, it worked. Right? That sense of self-satisfaction. And that is one of the most powerful tools, more powerful than any medicine out there, of being able to sustain a new way of living and being, is having that experience of, yes, I put in effort, I got results, I not just feel good physically, I feel good mentally. I'm very empowered to keep doing this.
So the people...
And your gut likes that, by the way, too.
Yeah. So the people that do this and then modify their diets, make the correct choices in amounts and types of food that they eat, can get off of this stuff. I do know a number of diabetics, I hate to say this, who, you know, I got to tell you, my weakness in food is ice cream. I could eat ice cream and pass up.
I saw you light up when I mentioned it.
Yeah, I could pass up a steak any day for ice cream. I tend not to eat it. Because it's just wonderful
stuff. Your gut
stuff.
tells you don't.
Yeah. So yeah, no. If I want to have a case of heartburn, I eat ice cream, and I guarantee you I will get reflux.
Okay.
Not from other foods, but from ice cream. But if that was a food addiction, that would be my food addiction. Okay. And every once in a while I'll have some, but I've gone a year without ice cream.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah. But I've seen like people that I know that are diabetics.
Yeah.
Who will be at ice cream place, and what are you doing here? I'll just take another pill. That's what you're saying. It's not to do that. You have to modify that mindset. Right. And what you're taking.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about early on as I was seeing people do this, right? There would be the people who'd be like, oh my gosh, my sugar's good, but they wouldn't really change things, and they would plateau in the benefit. And there were other people who was like, oh, my sugar's finally under control. And then they start thinking, well, I went to the diabetic educator, I know all this stuff that I'm not really doing, I'm gonna do it. And those are the people who really got on the journey and truly begin to experience reversal of their disease.
So you mentioned exercise, and I think exercise is quite important. I ride my mountain bike almost every day. I'm on the Montour Trail as much as I can be. I hate the thought of winter coming because it means I might have to put my bike away for a while. I go to Pilates 5 nights a week. I look forward to it. I see the benefits of it. I see how I feel. You know, this Pilates to me is wonderful. One day I went to sit in my chair at the office and the chair kicked out for me. And a couple years ago I would have fallen. Yeah. But I had the core strength not to fall. Right. And I caught myself and stood right up. Yeah. I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. You know, and everybody was like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine.
You're like, in fact, like you got the dopaminergic rush because you're like, I beat it.
So how important is exercise and what does it do?
Okay, so exercise will reduce your risk for every single type of cancer, except for skin cancer, And that's only because you don't spend the last 10 years of your life as a shut-in, so you get this increased risk. But reduces the risk of pancreatic cancer, leukemia cancers, lung cancer, and everything like that. Exercise circulates the blood through the body. Exercise burns those excess calories that you ate. Exercise flushes out the liver, opens up the arteries in the heart. Exercise rushes the endorphins in the brain. Exercise is good. It strengthens the bones, decreases the risk if you fall on that hip, you fracture. It stimulates the nervous system to fine-tune the balance control. Right? Exercise is phenomenal. We have this gift of being able to move our bodies, and there's so many kinds of exercise that I guarantee you there is some kind of exercise out there for anybody who thinks they don't like it.
So it delivers oxygen, and we all know that our cells need that, not to mention our lungs need it. It helps produce nitric oxide as well.
Yeah.
And without nitric oxide, you're not absorbing oxygen. Without oxygen, you're not producing nitric oxide. And the reason I say it that way is we have to really realize that synergistic effect that all of this works to make us healthy and give us health and wellness.
And you can see it. So you know I have the skin business.
Yeah,
when
we're going to get you back to talk about it. You can see it in your skin because it is critical.
You can see it in the skin.
We're at the end of the show, Dr. Plute. So I want everybody to know how anybody can get a hold of Dr. Plute.
Okay. You can call my office. You can Google me, Paragon Personal Health Care, Dr. Rebecca Plute, and call us at 724-746-7030.
And you can tune into my radio show, Dr. Ed Show, every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AM 1250 The Answer, 92.5. It's blogged on Rumble and so forth, all those platforms. Dr. Plute is often a wonderful guest on that show. Remember, healthy pet is a happy pet. I haven't said that for a while on this TV show. And when you're healthy, you're happy as well. God bless. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Wonderful show.